Welcome to Cybersecurity Awareness TV, episode number 386, recorded February 19th, 2022. I am your host, Mac Jackson Jr. I'm a cybersecurity expert and researcher. If this is the first time you've seen our show, on our show we provide information to you about cybersecurity awareness, including news, interviews, and tips on how to protect yourself, your family, and your business from the fastest growing crimes of the 21st century. I would like to thank everybody who's been a supporter of our show over the last few years, and we are here at WWDBTV, also seen on the Roku Network streaming. Folks, please check out our shows and all the shows on the Roku Network by WWDBTV as well. And thank you again for our listeners of your support. If you'd like to find out more information about my company and my show and what we do here, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can go to my website at macjacksonjr.jr. That's macjacksonjr.com, or go to my company's website, vandersoncybergroup.com, and find out information how you can protect yourselves, folks, from these cyber attacks. There's information that you can use today to protect yourselves. In today's episode, in our first segment, we're talking about something that is right on time, what's going on now in the media and in the news and from around the world, and that's the cyber attacks that are affecting the U.S., but it's connected to the standoff that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. It's reported that the Russian government and Ukraine has hackers that are hacking into the governmental agencies of the West, including Ukrainian government. And this is also fostering other attacks of other Western states as well. We'll be discussing that in this segment also. In our second segment, we'll go through an alarming report by the FBI talking about electronic cashless transactions, including Zelle, Vimeo, Cash Apps, and others. And in our last segment, as we do every week, folks, we emphasize the importance of tips that you can use today to protect yourselves from these types of cyber attacks. But first, folks, in our first segment, we're talking about what's going on with the cyber attacks that are affecting the U.S. over the Ukrainian war. That's standoff right now, folks, and we're hoping it doesn't happen, the war doesn't happen, but it looks like there may be a possibility of war happening. And it can be devastating to the U.S. as well, not just for weaponry, but the increasing awareness of the cyber war that's been happening going on now for years. And it is and will be turned up even more if Ukraine and Russia go into war. The Biden administration has stated that Russia has started this war attack and it's going to happen at any time with Ukraine. The war of the Ukrainian may not only be weaponized, but it will also include other Western states as well and the allies involved. This could mean the U.S. infrastructure could be attacked with cyber attacks, folks. And how does that affect you? Well, last year there was a huge cyber attack that affected the east coast of the United States, the gas pipeline with Colonial Pipeline that had a massive cyber attack, and it affected us. So yes, we are involved in it, folks, and it's something we need to be aware of. These attacks on the U.S. can create denial of service attacks within websites for your organization, shutting them down, and by doing this, folks, it will affect you in the commerce we have here in the U.S. and our economy. So yes, we need to be aware of it, and we need to let our politicians and legislators know that we are backing them and behind them, and they need to be able to resolve this, hopefully diplomatically as well. I have a clip here to show you, folks, from CBS News, from the former director of the CISA of the U.S. Homeland Security, Chris Krebs, to discuss these attacks with the U.S. and Russia. Here's a clip.
Russia's growing threat stretched from the front lines in Eastern Europe to power grids right here in the United States. The Department of Homeland Security issued a new warning about Moscow having the capability to carry out a range of cyber attacks against important websites and critical infrastructure. So for more on this, let's bring in CBS News cybersecurity analyst Chris Krebs. He's also the former director of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and he joins us now to talk about this. Chris, it's good to see you. So explain to our viewers just how sophisticated is Russia at conducting these types of cyber attacks? And I guess the more important question, Chris, is how good are we at countering them?
Yeah, so Russia, particularly their security services known as the FSB, the SVR, and then their military operations, the GRU, are very good. Unfortunately, they're in fact some of the best in the business. They've had a lot of practice over the last several years, and have really refined a different, a various set of toolkits to infiltrate government agencies, critical infrastructure, and do it in a very quiet, pernicious, long-standing way. And so, yes, they are quite good. In fact, they're one of the best out there. From a defensive perspective here in the U.S., we've gotten better. I think the real challenge, though, is that we are increasingly, as a society, dependent upon a variety of digital services and products, which gives any adversary, whether it's a criminal organization or a sophisticated state actor, lots of options. It's known as attack surface, and we have a pretty significant attack surface. But I think we have built up over the last few years a resilient infrastructure where any sort of cyber attack doesn't really have a broad national level impact. They would tend to be fairly localized.
You talk about our attack surface. Was that one of the lessons that we learned from the SolarWinds attack? That it seemed like suddenly we found out that SolarWinds was attached to all manner of companies and government agencies, and so attacking just one company had a ripple effect, or even, the ransomware attack on the pipeline, that they ended up shutting down the pipeline, not because the pipeline was being attacked, but because they were concerned about the possible fallout should there be more attacks. Are we learning that, our attack surface is just entirely too large or too connected?
Well, I think that's part of it. I also think we learned a different lesson from SolarWinds, and that was that it's no longer the big banks or the defense industrial base companies or the government agencies that should be concerned about Russian or Chinese or Iranian cyber activity. It's really everyone that plays a key part, particularly in the information technology supply chain. There are hundreds of companies that play pivotal and critical roles that are now on the targeting lists of these sophisticated actors. Kind of the joke I use is back in the heyday of bank crimes, where Willie Sutton would get asked, "Why do you rob banks?" and his answer was, "That's where the money is." Mm-hmm. Same thing goes for cloud services and technology companies. That's where the access and the data is right now. So we need to continue to improve the security along our software supply chain.
So, Chris, I guess the question is, to me, so we know that this is potentially something that could happen. We know that the Russians are actively trying to do this. Do we have the political will and the resources? Sounds to me like we need to revamp our grid systems. We're talking about infrastructure here. This is a critical infrastructure of this country. We need to revamp our grids and a number of other surface areas that are vulnerable to these attacks. Do we have the political will and the resources to do that?
Well, I wouldn't over-rotate necessarily on the immediate risk to American critical infrastructure based on a non-zero chance that the Russians may go into Ukraine. I don't think that there's necessarily an American critical infrastructure targeting package in the first strike as the Russians may roll into Ukraine. But if we do levy significant sanctions upon them, or we otherwise get involved in a defensive response, I think that puts some different options on the table for the Russians. And they've spent quite some time, several years, in fact, really scoping out what matters here in the U.S. And to the earlier point, the Colonial Pipeline disruption last summer really showed what gets everyone's political attention here. So I think more broadly, though, you mentioned infrastructure package. You talk about the president going to Pittsburgh. I was a pretty vocal advocate of cybersecurity requirements and spending in the infrastructure bill. Cyber is infrastructure, unfortunately. And so we have to start baking in security considerations and priorities into really any economic investment we make going forward, because these digital dependencies, these digital connections we have in our everyday lives are only going to increase for frankly the rest of human history. And so this is that next frontier of crime, of espionage, of disruptive attacks. And every single business leader needs to be thinking about how they may contribute, unfortunately, to some sort of economic disruption if they don't take security seriously.
Right. Chris Krebs, thank you very much.
Yes, folks. And as the director, Chris Krebs, continues to the discussion of Western governments and how they are hardening their cybersecurity policies and procedures to protect their homeland around the world from this type of attacks. Again, these attacks are allegedly coming from Russia into attacking Ukraine and Ukrainian government and Western governments. But Russia has denied that the hackers are from Russian government. But, you know, the benefits of these attacks have, of course, affected Russia as well and benefited Russia from these attacks. Let's continue this discussion from the director with CBS News, another clip we have for you here.
Russia says it has pulled back some forces but remains fortified on Ukraine's border. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with Vladimir Putin for 3 hours today, trying to navigate an end to this crisis. Along with its military presence, the U.S., Ukraine, and NATO allies are concerned about Russia's cyber attack capabilities. For more on this, I'd like to bring in CBS News cybersecurity analyst and former CISA director, Chris Krebs. Chris, welcome. It's great to have you with us. You know, we are already hearing reports today of cyber attacks in Ukraine against their defense ministry website and several state-owned banks. But Ukraine is not pointing the finger at Russia. Is this what you would expect from Moscow? And how else could President Putin use cyber attacks and information operations against Ukraine?
Well, what you just referenced is known as a denial of service attack. And it's basically where you flood a website with requests to load a page. It overwhelms the ability of that web page to serve up to whoever's trying to access it, and it takes the website down. There's no back-end impact, really. There's certainly, in the case of the banks, there's no impact on holdings or any sort of financial issues or anything like that. This, as you pointed out, where Ukraine can't quite say it's Russia just yet, it's a service that's available to almost anyone on the internet and on the dark web in particular. So it is too early to tell if it is Russia. However, we have seen Russian actors use these techniques along with others previously, including perhaps a couple weeks ago, where there were website defacements of various Ukrainian government agency websites. So these are the sorts of indicators that that Russia has done in the past. Is it a signal of things more aggressively to come? Probably too early to tell, but they do have significant and substantial capabilities that I would expect to see before any sort of physical, land-based invasion.
And as you mentioned, we've seen this before, but how prepared are we to react and respond to those tactics that they've used?
Well, the U.S., as well as other Western allies, have been providing cybersecurity support, both here in the U.S. with Cyber Command, as well as my former agency, CISA, has provided cybersecurity services over the last several years to help harden their agency and critical infrastructure networks, which would be presumably the first to get hit in any sort of Russian attack. I would expect for any first phase or first wave of an invasion or attack on Ukraine by Russia that the majority of their activity from a cyber perspective will be constrained to Ukrainian networks. However, depending on how the U.S. reacts, including with sanctions, if the U.S. and Western response is substantial enough to really get the ire of the Kremlin, then you could see directed cyber activity at U.S. organizations. I think that would probably start with sort of deniable efforts like ransomware. But if things get hot enough, it's possible, probably unlikely, but possible that you would see an escalation where actual Russian government intelligence services would go after U.S. networks. But again, there's a chance, and every U.S. business needs to be thinking through what their incident response plans and ability to respond to an incident looks like.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Chris, because of course we're focused on thinking that any sort of cyber attack would be between Russia and Ukraine, but it's important to point out that there could be retaliation, to the U.S. as well. So your advice to business owners and everyone really, is to make sure your security is up to speed. Is that right?
Yeah, make sure that you've got that incident response plan ready to go. All the contact information is up to date. If you have a moment, you could conduct a drill or an exercise. There's one more piece that I'd flag, though, is that previously Russian operations, like in 2017, where they launched an attack known as NotPetya, even though it was possibly designed only to hit Ukraine, due to operational design, it kind of skipped out of the bounds of Ukrainian networks and hit U.S. and other networks. So even though they may only be targeting Ukraine, there's always a possibility that something goes wrong and that there's collateral damage from a cyber perspective outside.
Right. All right. Well, Chris Krebs, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
So, folks, it is clear. Organizations must be proactive in developing cybersecurity response programs and training policies to mitigate these damages of possible cyber attacks within their organization, and you as individuals as well. Folks, our best defense against these types of cyber attacks is through education, training your people, training individually of how to avoid these types of cyber attacks. And folks, we must #stay cyberwoke. We'll be back, Cybersecurity Awareness TV, after these messages. Hi folks, I would like to welcome Ben Bowie from MyNiceTie.com as one of our newest sponsors for Cybersecurity Awareness TV. At MyNiceTie.com, they provide and are committed to providing classy neckties for the business community. At MyNiceTie.com, their motto is Wise Up, Suit Up, and Stand Up. You can find nice ties like the one I'm wearing now at MyNiceTies.com. Hi folks, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. In this segment, we're talking about scams. Yes folks, scams. These scammers are always looking for ways to get your personal information. The FBI has warned about different types of scams, especially the ones dealing with cashless transactions like Zelle, Vimeo, Cash Apps, and PayPal and the like. Scammers are trying to find out ways to get your information by using social engineering techniques, becoming imposters when they call you on the phone, stating that they're from your bank. Because folks, like we have stated on this show, and especially if you've been a viewer of this show in the past, we have shown you how scammers would have pieces of the puzzle about you that they have stolen or gotten or purchased from the darknet, where they can be an imposter when they contact you. Just a little bit of information that they'll have on you to make you, that is, the victim, feel like you're talking to an authorized person representing the bank or the actual credit card company. But it's actually a scammer, folks, trying to get additional information from you or trying to make you to give them money from your account. And there's ways to avoid that, folks. We have an investigation on this particular types of hack and scams that are going on. We'd like to share this with you. This is an FBI clip that we'd like to share with you, warning victims to be careful when they are dealing with cashless transactions like Vimeo, Zelle, and others. Here's an investigation we found from ABC 7 in Chicago.
It's a money transfer alert. More victims are reaching out to the I-Team about scams preying on people using the popular money transfer tool, Zelle. We first told you about a scheme in August. Now the FBI has a warning, and we're finding different scams which can cost you thousands. Here's how you can avoid all of them.
It's just scary because he had my name, date of birth, and my account number. Like, who the heck would have all that information?
McHenry resident Demi Woods lost $3,500 after she got what she thought was a call from her bank. Her caller ID showed Bank of America. Instead, it was a scammer telling her that there were thousands of dollars in so-called fraudulent withdrawals from her account via Zelle.
They even said over the phone, whatever code you get, we are not going to ask you for, so don't tell me the code. So I don't know how much more legit it could sound.
The caller told her to Zelle herself to get the money back, which would cancel the fraudulent transactions.
It had my first and my last name in the to section and the from section. And then after I hit send, all of a sudden, the to section changed to some bank I've never heard of.
Tip number 1, never Zelle yourself. The FBI is also warning consumers.
You think that it's safe, you're sending money to an account that has your name on it. That does not mean anything. They can pretend to be your bank. They can pretend to be your money transfer app.
And there's another scam involving phishing emails made to look like they're from Zelle. You were scammed out of $4,200.
That's right, that's right.
Bank of America customer Jiaming Chong sold a camera online. He never got paid for the camera and lost $1,000.
He was going to actually send me the money via Zelle.
The buyer was a fraudster who fooled him into clicking on this phishing email, which asked Chong to reimburse the buyer $1,000 to upgrade the buyer's Zelle account. Chong sent that upgrade money in gift cards, and now it's all gone.
Slow down and take a look at what's being asked and say, does this make sense?
So tip number 2, beware of fake Zelle emails. The company told the I-Team that Zelle will never email you or call you to request money. Look out for emails with bad grammar, spelling errors, and hover over the sender's address to make sure it's not fake. In a third scam, a victim's bank account was hacked.
How can people actually get into your account and steal your money?
Dharmapad Mishra lost thousands of dollars after his Zelle account within his Bank of America account was compromised by hackers.
Through Zelle, I kind of lost $4,450.
Tip number 3, prevent hacked withdrawals by having a strong, unique banking password and use two-factor authentication. The FBI says all of these money transfer scams are on the rise because people don't want to use cash, and
There are very few safeguards in place to get your money back when you're using these applications, and so it's kind of a scammer's dream.
Bank of America refunded Woods and Mishra and is trying to reach out to Chong, saying that scammers are spoofing numbers to appear as though they are legitimate businesses, adding, "We remind clients that they should not provide confidential account information to unidentified individuals. Legitimate companies would not ask a customer to transfer funds between accounts in order to help prevent fraud, nor request sensitive account information." Zelle says if a red flag goes up about a transaction, they will notify the bank to send an alert to the user.
Scammers are going to try to make them move quickly. There's time to call the company itself to make sure that this is a real transaction.
Bank of America has recently added a new alert to its app saying the bank will never ask you to transfer money to anyone, including yourself, and that you should never transfer money as a result of an unexpected text or call. More warnings and tips on our website, abc7chicago.com.
Yes, folks. And if you suspect that you are being contacted by your bank, they've called you out of nowhere and you do not make the call or understand it, definitely contact the bank yourself manually. Contact your bank, your local bank, hopefully, and ask them about this particular transaction or phone call that you've gotten. And again, if you still are on the line with this person, you don't know who they are, just do like my mom always does now. Just hang up on them. Simple logic. Just hang up on them, folks. It's amazing how people are trying to use ways to get our personal information, and we must be vigilant and keep aware of these types of attacks. We'll be back, folks, here in Cybersecurity Awareness TV after these messages.
You can help limit the damage from identity theft with some quick responses. Placing a fraud alert on your credit reports, filing a complaint with the FTC, and then filing a police report. Taking these steps will give you some important tools to deal with other problems that may come up, like charges you didn't authorize on your credit card, phone, or utility bills, like ATM withdrawals or debit card purchases you didn't approve, like getting a letter from the IRS saying someone has filed for a tax refund in your name. Keep records of your calls and copies of documents. If these problems do come up later, you'll have the necessary tools close at hand. For more tips and tools on dealing with identity theft, visit ftc.gov/ID theft. That's ftc.gov/ID theft.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. I am your host, Mac Jackson Jr. In this segment, we talk about what you could do to protect yourselves from these cyber attacks and cyber threats. As we've talked about in this show today, about the types of cyber wars that are going on, there are things that you could do to protect yourself. And as we say every week, the first starts with the password. Yes, password first is the gateway into getting your information protected from cyber attacks. Make sure you have a strong password, but also the second thing, folks, you should do is use two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. If it is available at your work or on a website that you're visiting, that you have from your financial institution and the like, definitely sign up for two-factor authentication. It gives you another layer of protection. Now, there is more that are being done by other organizations, and cybersecurity experts like myself and around the world are developing other techniques that we will be able to present to our communities in protecting ourselves from these type of cyber threats. But that's one of the things you should do. And folks, the other thing you should do is make sure you go to our YouTube channel, folks, and like, subscribe, and click on a notification, folks, so let YouTube know that you want to follow any new episodes of our show, and follow us on Cybersecurity Awareness TV. Now again, when you have your laptops, folks, make sure you have a VPN, a virtual private network, on your machine and your smartphone if you are visiting a coffee shop or a hotspot that you're not secure with. Make sure that you have these type of devices on your computer or your laptop and your smartphone. Have antivirus software as well. The other thing I would tell you, folks, is on your smartphones, and I've seen this happen a lot. I stated this for years on our show, but we want to make sure we get it across to you again. On your smartphones, folks, make sure you turn off your Wi-Fi when you're not using it. Turn off your Wi-Fi, your smartphones, when you're not using it. If you're at your home, while you're on your Wi-Fi there, it's perfectly fine, and it should be secured by having proper security set up in your home or your office. However, when you're in travel between point A to point B across town and your Wi-Fi is on, it is trying to jump on the internet by bouncing off of routers within proximity of your smartphone, your smart device. So I would suggest you turning it off, because you don't know if your phone is going to connect to a Wi-Fi device by a nefarious person such as a hacker. Could have the Wi-Fi, open Wi-Fi just ready for you, your phone, to attach to it. And once it attaches to it, all it takes is a few seconds for the hacker to either upload information to your phone or have your phone download information to the hacker as well. So definitely protect yourself. And best thing you can do from what I've just told you is to tell a friend. Spread this information, folks, to people you know, so we protect ourselves from these types of cyber attacks. And like we say every week, folks, our best defense against these cyber attacks is through education. So that's our show for you this week, folks. I remind you to follow us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Facebook and alike, folks. Go to my website at macjacksonjr.com. That's macjacksonjr.com. And talk to us about what we can do to protect yourself from these types of cyber attacks. We're here every week, folks, at Cybersecurity Awareness TV. Oh, also, my phone number is at 702-868-0808. That's 702-868-0808. If you have a question, one of our consultants will get back to you right away on this, folks. Thanks again, folks. And again, we will see you next week. Bye for now, folks.